So, at this point we have thoroughly explored some of the more popular and comprehensive mysteries in RE4, those that, since the game's release, have long since been covered to the extent that they have. I really wanted to approach a topic that wasn't needlessly speculative or inessential, because that Hook Crane mystery basically became a comedy video by the end of it, so I decided to take this one more seriously. In the very first cutscene of the game, you're introduced to Leon and the police officers while on the road to the village. The atmosphere is relaxing, the setting a comfortable and chill environment in the backseat of a car with two friendly acquaintances. Leon looks out the window in the direction of the forest while listening to native Spanish music, narrating a summary of the mission in his head. Although the first scene is relatively short and doesn't elicit any horror, the bleak colours and general isolation of the forest install a sense of insecurity, which sets the tone moving forward and for what's about to come. Just before reaching the village, amidst Leon's dialogue, you'll encounter the first and, in my opinion, most eerie scene in the entire game.
It's freezing. So cold all of a sudden. Must be my imagination. Sorry it took so long.
The Stalker is a brief occurrence in RE4 that people would have either ignored completely whilst experiencing more of the game, or chalked it up as a cheap scare to captivate the player, to not be considered much beyond a clever camera technique. In reality, this is a mystery that has been stuck in my head for over a decade now. Evidently, I was just as confused that such an iconic question hasn't yet received the coverage of so many others, so I think it's about time that we shed some light on this small and creepy mystery. The scene itself plays into the eerie vibe present throughout Resident Evil 4, and its more laid-back approach to horror with its utilisation of ambient music heard throughout the safe rooms, a tradition that I think was mastered in this game. This point of view shot is actually used twice in succession, immediately preceding this one on your way to the cabin, which will be the last instance in the entire game when this technique is used. With a comparison this close together, we can start to gather some key features in association with the Stalker in the woods, and who knows, maybe these two will become connected in some way. The shot predominantly takes place with the Stalker crouched or hidden in tall grass. This grass can be seen from the very beginning during our descent towards the village. It can also be seen in the same cutscene on the opposite side of the hill. It's clear right away that the strands are exceedingly scarce and aren't thick nor tall enough to conceal a human-sized creature. Although that doesn't invalidate the motive of the Stalker, they could have just been scared or ignorant. The police officer would have definitely been able to see what was hidden regardless, partially because of the transparency of the grass, and the fact that there's a split second where the officer looks directly into the camera, by extension looking the Stalker dead in the eyes. With that in mind, the Stalker had to have been either camouflaged or small enough for the grass to conceal it entirely. Potentially, the police officer could have still seen whatever was hidden in the grass and just decided not to tell us back at the car for whatever reason. To be honest, judging by his reluctancy to step back outside a few minutes later and being the first to make excuses, I think this is somewhat possible.
We'll stay and watch that car. Don't want to get any parking tickets.
There isn't much else to go over besides this, however. I think we can only measure this mystery based off of the Stalker's ability to hide itself, as well as a potential motive and general location as always. The first thing that should come to mind when initially seeing this, in addition to playing the first few minutes of the village, would be a regular Ganado enemy. On paper, it makes the most sense out of all of them. The villagers could have simply been scouting this main road ahead of time before planning their assault at the bridge, which essentially kills the officers and destroys our only route out of the village. The first section does seem orchestrated in such a way. The truck is obscured from view of the car and is simultaneously blocking our only path onwards, thus forcing Leon inside the house where the ambush unfolds. It seems like there was a team of Ganados who operated the truck and brought an officer back to the village square for execution, and the other team locked Leon inside the cabin where they assumed he would also get killed. These are the three guys who we fight after jumping out of the window. The truck Ganados must have a teleportation plagus inside of them, because no matter how fast we are, we can't see them bring one of the officers back to the village where he's already been burnt at the stake. Coincidentally, this was the same officer who the Stalker was so fixated on back at the road. After the cutscene plays out, there's a fade out shot which transitions into our arrival at the village. There's no way to really determine the distance travelled between where this occurrence took place and our first encounter with an in-game enemy. I just think that it's implied to be not long after, because the following scene immediately fades back in while we're already at our destination. There's no clarification from the officers about almost being at the village, there's no commemorative statement that you'd expect from a long car ride, and the driver mentioned the village preemptively.
Just up ahead is the village.
I'll go and have a look around.
Meaning he was already knowledgeable of the area to an extent, probably just because it was a relatively short car ride from the police station. In summary, I believe that Ganado could have had enough time and was close enough to the village to inform a group regarding the arrival of a police car, and subsequently had enough time on his hands to form the attack that we encounter at the bridge. So just like that, we already have the general location and a concrete motive for Ganado's involvement, but there's still a lot more that needs to be discussed here. Judging by the camera's point of view, the perpetrator being an adult Ganado is very difficult given how low to the ground he is. As stated before, the stalker had to have been either small enough to avoid suspicion entirely, or camouflaged in some way. Although the game's colour palette of greys and light browns allow for this natural blending of textures, I can't allow for that being a legitimate defence, unfortunately. We know that the children have all died, so that's out of the question as well, so what about clothing? Well, there is an instance in the village where someone abducts Leon's jacket. This was while he was being carried to the lodge with Lewis in between 1-1 and 1-2, and is only noticeable in separate ways. Besides that, the villager attires are extremely consistent and almost repetitive. The occasional Ganado with glasses, Leon's jacket, and the impaled woman are the only 3 instances of villagers wearing unique items of clothing, so I think we can rule it out entirely. The only other way that our Ganado could have gotten away with this is if the police officer did see him after all and decided not to do anything about it. I've long said that the officer's reaction seems quite distraught when accounting for his dialogue at the bridge, but what could have actually caused this? I don't know. Please let me know in the comments if you can find anything to support this, otherwise I'll have to announce that Ganado's involvement in this mystery was impossible after all. Although the evidence is mostly in favour of a villager informant, there has to be a reason for why the officer looked him in the eyes and didn't do anything about it. This is one of the only suspects where the officer could have actually said, "just my imagination," as an overreaction. In the context of the scene, it comes together quite well as more of a comedic moment, however unintentional it may be. The feeling of someone watching you, feeling a chill down your back, just to notice a chicken and feel like an idiot. The officer could have also been hiding embarrassment from his friend and Leon. This would explain his hesitancy to step back outside while making excuses about parking tickets. When something like a chicken scared him in his most vulnerable moment, it would make sense for why he'd mentally check out as a result.
What's the matter?
Did you lose your nerve?
The motive is obvious enough for any animal lover or experienced player watching this. She just wanted to prepare Leon ahead of time by laying him some eggs. The same eggs that are scattered throughout the opening segments of the village, which act as health items or as an Ashley catapulting device. Unfortunately, Leon was looking out of the opposite side window during this cutscene as we know, but the intention was still there regardless. Just like with the last theory, the chicken pens were all located within a close distance to the main road. One of them could have simply escaped the village and made its way here. Lastly, animals in general are afraid of loud noises, cars being a prime example, which gives us more insight on why the chicken was spying on the car from the safety of a bush. In conclusion, if it weren't for my next theory, this would be the definitive answer. There's no piece of evidence negating a chicken's involvement at all, and the camera's point of view matches perfectly for such a small animal. It's a great choice for anyone who shares a similar opinion. What's not to be said about the dog at this point? Once again he makes his way, justifiably, into another one of these mysteries, and for good reason of course. Firstly, our first encounter with the dog takes place at the very beginning of the game. You are required to save him from the bear trap, otherwise your playthrough is void and you should delete it immediately and start a new one. His reason for spying on the police car could also be the fact that dogs are generally cautious around cars, and in this case was pessimistically tentative for the reasons that I'm about to discuss here. Now, we can directly pinpoint the exact moment when the dog gets caught in the bear trap by examining the background noise before and after the ambush takes place. This shows that the dog was actually scared of the truck and ran into the bear trap as a result of the loud noise. This is concrete evidence that proves the dog's reason for hiding in the woods in the first place, as well as being this elusive, because unlike the chicken, the dog would have had to make an effort to not be seen. I think that the dog was checking out the police car from the very beginning, fled when it drove past the first time using the bush for cover, fled again when the collision took place near the bridge, where he then got caught in the bear trap. The location matches up well, the motive matches up well, and the dog is still small enough to be able to hide amidst the tall grass if he needed to. It explains why he's still afraid of Leon at the farm. It demonstrates the paths used by the dog before and after stepping into the bear trap, both of which line up to the corresponding areas, the main road and the farm. The dog probably takes this route a lot while hunting for food. A primary source of that may come from the dead animals that were killed by passing cars, and it also explains why he showed up for the El Gigante fight. He wouldn't have known that Leon was here if he wasn't stalking him. Like the police officer, he was probably in plain sight all along yet we couldn't identify him. So in conclusion, I'll adamantly lean towards the dog on this one. So that's all I have for this mystery. If there's possible suspects or pieces of information that I missed, please discuss them in the comments as always. This mystery has always been one of my personal favourites growing up, and I'm glad that I got to give my input on it after all of this time. I love the fact that this occurs at the very start of the game as more of a blank slate and just how scary it is in general.